Hi guys, today in the workshop we have this BMW 3 Series that's in for a water leak. So we can see looking into the coolant reservoir that there's nothing left in it at all. So what we're going to have to do is fill it up with water, put on our pressure tester and see where that takes us. So what we want to do is fill this up with water, use this cap to choose the appropriate adapter that's needed for the car. So let's fill this up with water. We can put on our adapter. And start pumping it up. So that's gone to 15 psi. You don't really want to go any higher. And we want to start looking for any signs of a leak. I can hear something. Yeah, we've definitely got a leak. So that's coming out of the back end of the lower engine cover. So I'll take off the pressure now, strip all that off, and then let's see what we can find. So now that the car's up in the air, we can see that the drip was actually coming from this little cutout that's in the under tray. So we're gonna have to take off all of the million screws that hold this under tray on, and hopefully we'll be able to see where that leak is coming from. So let's start taking all of these 8mm off. There's a lot of them. So with that cover off, I still can't see anything. Everything just looks wet, but I can't see anything obvious. So let's pump this back up and see where we are. Well, that is really awkward to see. So I'm not sure if you can see there, but that looks like it's coming from either the pipes or the housing of that cooler. Yeah, so it's hard to see if it's coming from that actual housing or if it's coming from above it and just dripping along it. So we bring it back down and I'll try and squeeze the camera in to see if I can see anything better from up top. Couldn't see anything earlier, but we might have to take a few things off for a better view. So with the top engine cover off. Oh, not sure if you can see that. Just there. You can just about see water running off out of this cracked pipe. Just out of that cracked pipe, going on to the housing of the oil filter. And then that must be running down over that plastic housing, which is the leak that we can see from underneath. Okay, well that pipe looks considerably easier to replace. So once that pipe is off, we can get a better look at that housing as well. And then we can go from there. With things like this, especially water leaks, it's really easy to condemn a plastic housing because they're so common to go as it is. But this is why it's always good to double check, try and see it from a different angle, because you don't know if the leak is coming from slightly above it and running down like this one is. So I'm not saying that there still might not be an issue with that housing, but I'll know a lot more once I've taken this pipe off and I can see it from above and I can do another pressure test. So the work's been authorised and the part is on order for tomorrow morning. So in the meantime, let's go strip it apart. Because we're so close to the alternator and there's some exposed positive wires, it's always a safer bet to disconnect the battery. That way, you know, if you drop your ratchet and anything like that, you know you're safe and it's a safe area to work on. So yeah, electricity and water don't mix, so it's better to be safe. And on these BMWs, they're in the back here. So if you remove this compartment, you'll be able to see the battery. So just here's the negative terminal. So just using a spanner, we just need to slacken this off. So with that disconnected, I just like to make sure that there's a piece of cardboard, something like that, it's out the way. But on this is enough room where you can guide it down and out the way, just to make sure that it doesn't pop back up and reconnect, so it makes the system all live again. So yeah, that can stay down there. Now we can get back to the job of taking that pipe off. So right next to the alternator, next to this oil filter housing, is this pipe that we need to replace. So the top radiator hose starts there, feeds through and goes to this hard pipe. And there's a clip just there that we can take off and hopefully release this rubber pipe. And then I think I can see just 2 bolts holding this on. When I spoke to BMW, they did tell me there was 3 bolts, so we'll see. So here's that rubber pipe where it connects to that hard pipe that we need to change. Using a little hook, we can prise up this clip, or hopefully prise it up. Oh, that was easier than expected. Might come off like that. No. So it could be grabbing on the sides a little bit still. So I'll try to remove this clip completely. There you go, so that's completely off. Oh, it's still a bit stiff. Okay, so because that is so tight, what we might have to do is separate the hard pipe first, manipulate it up here, and then so we can get a clearer grab on it. So it's hard to see, but I'll try and point out to you where these bolts are. So just down there you can see one, down there you can see another one. Quite a tight fit to get to. They look like an E-Torx. They are E8s. So just guide it through. Going to be very careful to not drop these bolts. Might be worth getting a magnet ready. So can't find my actual magnet, but this extension has a magnet on the end. Try and feed that through to grab it. There's one. See if we can get the second one. Ah, so the end I've got now, it's just got a little bit of a wobble on it. So I can get on it, not in a straight line. Okay. Come on. This one was really difficult to get out, mainly because the top part of the inlet manifold is in the way, like directly in the way. And the socket will only help you get it off so far. And then you kind of have to walk it off and guide it off. We managed to guide it off with the magnet, luckily. But yeah, that one was really awkward. It'll be interesting to see how that one goes back in. So with those 2 disconnected, let's see if this is any more free. Something is still holding it. And I am thinking the inlet manifold has to come off in order to do this job. Like there's flex in it, but something is definitely holding it. Yeah, I think that this has to come off. There's got to be another bolt there. Just when you think a job is going to be easy. So it's now the next day, we've had that part in. Unfortunately, we can now see that it does have that 3rd bolt hole. I don't know why BMW have done this. It must be a personal attack on me because now I've got to do a little bit more work in order to get this pipe off. But if you want to replace this pipe yourself, here's the part number, just in case you wanted to order it directly from BMW. But yes, so now I'm going to start taking off the inlet manifold just to remove that one pipe. Well done, BMW. So first thing, in order to get this off, we need to remove these covers, any wiring that's going around it that we might have to take off. So yeah, let's get into it. First off is these clips. Be careful not to lose these. So with them out, this is hooked on something around the back here. Knowing BMW, there's probably another clip, but this can be fed back so it's out of the way. So this cable that goes around bolted to this air pipe and it goes to the alternator. This has to be disconnected. Again, it's a good thing we've disconnected that battery, so then we can make sure that we disconnect this and it's all safe to work on. So we'll disconnect this 13 off the top of the alternator. So with that out of the way, now we want to disconnect any electrics that might be hindering us as well. So there's these clips here that need to be pulled off. So this is just the cable that goes down to the throttle body. We just want to make sure that's loose. Disconnect this sensor here. We don't really want to disturb that just in case, because that's probably seized in there. And because it's not damaged now, we don't want to have to replace it if it's not damaged. So just take off the electrical connectors. So when we take this up, this can stay in place. So it's just to the side there, because we're going to have to disconnect the intake manifold here from the throttle body and here from the EGR. So that should free up this side, and then there's going to be bolts that hold this onto the actual head. A lot of these are clips, and because they're plastic, you've got to be really careful not to break anything. And you have to be really gentle with these security tabs, so you don't damage anything on the multi-plugs themselves. So we'll just disconnect the throttle body. So looking at the throttle body, there's a little bit of oil residue on there. These are known to kind of block up with carbon, and it affects the operation of the swirl flaps, which helps with emissions and performance. So when this comes off, I am expecting it to be stinking. So we'll see what happens now when it comes all the way off. I'm going to try and guide this, because it's on a flexible pipe underneath, just as out the way as possible. And it might give me a little bit more access to get the multi-plug off the back of this. Shall we guide this out? So once this is out, you can just try and set it to one side. So I'm just going to disconnect these two, which go towards the EGR. These feel like they won't come out of here. They'll just sit in there. They should separate once these other bolts are undone. So let's see if we can get this cover out of the way. Take off this Torx 20. So I'm thinking, just to get this out of the way completely, let's open this box up and see if I can disconnect these cables. So now what we want to do is, now that this is off, we can lift these cables out of here, but we'll have to disconnect them from both the ECU and this little assembly of connectors here. So let's just start disconnecting them. They'll only go back in one way and they're color coded. So they should only go in to their assigned spots. But it is good to make a little note. Everything goes. Again, this is BMW making my life awkward. That's disconnected. So now with that, we can push these covers out. Bring that back this way. So we can set them to one side. So the only wiring left here is this one to the top of the alternator, this one that goes down there, it's cable tied to the alternator, and it goes down to the air conditioning compressor. So that'll have to be disconnected, all this taken up here, just to give us access when we want to take this out. There we go. So that comes up there. Should be able to just squeeze with the finger. Maybe not. There you go. Then the signal wire is out of the alternator. So it's taken off the 8mm socket for the bracket of the electrical connector on the aircon pump. Careful you don't drop the bolt. Just carefully snip the clip. Make sure you don't touch the actual cable. You can see here where the way that the wire was routed has actually started to rub through the insulation, the protective insulation. It's a good thing that we're doing this job now, so I can put tape over this because it hasn't actually compromised the cable yet, just to put an extra layer of protection onto this. So now that that's disconnected, pull this over there. So we should be just about good to go. So let's start disconnecting the 10mm that hold this in place. So there's these clips over here holding some cables. They need to be routed out of the way because they look like they are in the way of this 10mm that's over here. So right now I've undone the 10mm bolts that go along the outline of the inlet manifold that connected to the cylinder head. I think there was only 5. I may be wrong, I'll have to double check, and it is still quite stiff. There's a little bit of flex in it, but you've got to be careful because the plastic, just because it flexes doesn't necessarily mean that it's loose. The seals and the gaskets that sit between them, they could also be stuck in place as well. So we just need to gently try and work it back and forth. Feels like it's coming. There we go. There we go. So the issue that we were having is that what was holding it in place was this gasket. There's so much carbon buildup on the swirl flaps that it's caused... Oh, wow. The swirl flaps are actually broken. But what was holding it in place was the carbon had basically formed its way around the gasket, causing it to make another seal, holding this in place. I know these are common for the swirl flaps to go, but I've not seen one quite like this. So here are those swirl flaps. You can see the oil residue and the carbon buildup. Like, this swirl flap is just managing to turn completely freely of itself, so it's not even attached properly to this inner shaft. Oh, same goes there. If I get a light on that, you can see where it's broken away. That is really bad. That one's okay. But we'll have to change all of this, because if these come loose, and I'm suspecting there used to be one there, these could have the potential to fall into the engine and cause massive internal problems. So this swirl flap that's missing, the one just there that I've just shown you, I found it, and it is inside the engine. I'm not sure if you'll really be able to see it, but it is down there right next to the valve. So I'm going to have to try to retrieve that now. But other than these other issues that we found and that we do have to put right, there is that single other bolt that we have to undo in order to remove the pipe that we initially came here for. We can actually remove this now. And this again is still solid on here. Just trying to gently guide it out. It's fighting me till the end. There we are. And there is that pipe removed, finally. So as it was like that. So the leak was coming from this side here. If you look at it, not sure if that shows up on camera, but you can see a little indent there. And there is a hairline crack just along it there. Now this is a lot of work for a small coolant pipe. That should be, a half-hour job. But in a way, it's a good thing, because now we've seen all of these other issues that need to be put right. If we had just replaced this pipe and not been made aware of the issues with the swirl flaps, the customer could have driven down the road and had a catastrophic failure. So I will let you guys know how I get on. So right now, the swirl flap that has come off of this is still inside the engine, which is luckily sat just on top of the valve. It's really lucky that it didn't break up into a million pieces and go inside the engine into the cylinder. So now, not sure if you've played the game Operation before, but this is going to be a very delicate situation where I need to try and get it out without damaging it or having it fall to pieces. Wish me luck. So with a very thin pliers, let's hope if this goes down deep enough. I'm just trying to work it out from all of the carbon without trying to squeeze too tightly. This really doesn't want to be moved. Come on, it's slowly coming out. Oh, I've got it. Oh, wow. That was really scary, because I half thought that this was going to break apart. But you can see there, this should be completely enclosed like this side. But the plastic is just broken apart and it detached from that. Detached from this centerpiece. Yeah, so the customer's very lucky with that one. So at least now I'm happy that there's no more debris inside the engine. Now we just need to price up a replacement. So the part has finally arrived from BMW, and now we can get to work swapping this over. So this comes as a gasket set, which includes the new swirl flaps. So that was really lucky. Normally when you have an issue with the swirl flaps, you actually have to end up replacing the entire manifold. So we kind of got away with this one. So now we have to take off the old swirl flaps and fit these, but before we refit the manifold, we need to make sure that all of the meeting surfaces are all nice and clean, so there's not an issue with any of these gaskets making a seal. But also, let's not forget that we also have to fit that new coolant pipe, because all of the bolts are underneath the manifold, so we don't want to forget that. So looking at the new part, we can see that it includes a new arm that goes off the end of the motor that controls the position of the swirl flaps. So we don't want to damage any of that, so we'll remove the motor just to make sure that the plastic piece that fits into there doesn't get damaged when we try to remove the rest of it. So these are Torx 30s. So we can just undo these. There's 3 of these that hold it on. Once this last screw is out, it should come away quite nicely. And there you go, there's that plastic piece that slots into the arm there that moves back and forth. Okay, and these are just held on with little plastic clips. We should be able to just prise up. Might be better to do it with a pick. Now that is separated. What we'll want to do before we swap over the new part onto there is give this a little bit of a clean, just to give you an idea on the level of sludge that we're dealing with. All we've got to do is just, even if we just try and prise some of the major pieces off with a screwdriver, so just to give you an idea, that's how much carbon came out just with a few, scrapes and the odd shake. Now we're going to put this into the parts washer. We're going to have to take off all of the sensors just to make sure that none of them get damaged. Carbon is a awful substance to get in your skin. It takes ages to kind of wash off, and also it tends to block up, well, one, the airways that are in plastic housings like these, and they're a nightmare for blocking up certain air sensors or pressure sensors. Oftentimes, if you clean up a sensor, that you can still damage that internal element anyway. So it is a best bet to just replace those sensors. We'll see if we can get away with these ones. We may have to replace them later on though. So now I've got one of the guys cleaning that in the parts washer. So now my job is to clean up this surface as best I can, just to make sure that everything meets nicely and it doesn't damage or get in the way of any of the seals. As you can see here, there's still a lot of carbon buildup on this side of the engine as well, not just in that plastic housing. We'll have to do our best to kind of get rid of most of this. What some people like to do is put an additive into the car later on when it's running, just to help burn away this carbon. So what I'm trying to do now is just help scrape away some of the excess, just to try and get rid of the big chunks of it. The rest of it we will have to leave for the intake cleaner. Again, anything you scrape can fall back down to sit next to the valve or fall into the cylinder, so you do want to take some care in the parts that you're trying to remove. Again, I'm likely to be here while doing this, so I'll come back once I've done the majority of it and show you how I managed to get on. So these are looking a lot better. For the really stubborn parts and for the any residue left from the previous seal, you can use a little bit of abrasive paper just to give it a light scratch, just to help the seals sit a little bit. You don't want to cut too deep into this because you'll end up causing more problems and the gaskets won't seal if you push too hard with an abrasive paper, because you don't want to scratch too heavily into this metal. When you're happy that that surface is clean, we can finally fit this defective pipe that we came here in the first place to replace. So before we fit that, get the pipe that attaches to it, because this was really stiff coming off. So the clip that we took off completely earlier, you just want to slip that back into place. You're going to take that new pipe. There's a little plastic mark on here there, and it matches a cutout that's on this coolant pipe. So you can't fit it the wrong way. So it just marries up with that. And you just want to make sure that it sits all the way home. And that clip should push in nicely. Give it a little bit of a wiggle test, just to make sure that it doesn't pop out of that seal. Because otherwise, if it's not all the way home, it'll leak later on. And with all the stress that we've had so far, that is the last thing we need. With that now, we can guide it back down into place. With our first bolt, we can nice and easily catch that. Happy they're caught and it can sit nice and flush. Nip these up. Remember, there's a specific torque setting for all of these. Make sure that you pay attention to what those are so that you don't over tighten them. Okay, so this is back from being cleaned with the new set of swirl flaps. Just want to guide it in nice to exactly where it was. And these clips are plastic, so again, just be very careful. You don't want to force them on in the wrong position because they will snap. It is a very tight fit. You want to make sure that everything is sitting exactly where it needs to be. Another reason to make sure that the inlet manifold is clean is because where the carbon builds up around each port, they can block and stop the swirl flaps from moving freely. So when you do fit the new swirl flaps, you just want to try and operate the arm yourself to make sure that those flaps turn freely like that. Before fitting the manifold back onto the engine, we want to refit that swirl flap position motor. It'll only go on one way, but the trick is marrying it up with the arm so that it can actually still control the position of the swirl flaps. And we are in. So the Torx 30s that we took out before just go back into place. Just want to nip these up until you're happy that everything is all the way home, and then you can give everything a final tighten. Remember, don't overdo these because it is made out of plastic and you will eventually go from righty-tighty to righty-loosey, and that's never a good thing. And a quick final tighten. There we go. Now we can refit it onto the actual engine. So just gently guide it into place. Guide it into its rough position because we want to make sure that we don't foul anything. There's a lot of cabling here that we moved out of the way earlier, and it's very easy for some of that to get jammed underneath the intake manifold. So we just want to double check, triple check and all that just to make sure that you don't have any issues. It should just fall nicely into place to the point where you can catch some of the bolts. You can roughly see where the meeting surface is. So as long as you're happy that it's sitting fairly flush, I would try grabbing a 10mm. Not bother with a ratchet for now, just go on with your hand just to see if you can catch the bolt. And start each of the threads by hand. Last thing you want again is to cross thread anything. That's caught. And that 10mm is caught. So now I've just got one in the back there. There's 5 bolts altogether that hold the inlet manifold to the engine. So once that one is caught, then I will get my technical data. We'll tighten them all up in the correct sequence and then start putting the electrics back over. So just final tightened the inlet manifold bolts. Remember there's 5 of them, they're 10mm. And when you are tightening them down, because they're on a rubber gasket, there will be an element of the gasket crushing. So it won't just go tight, it'll hit resistance and then slowly build as you tighten it down. If you over tighten them, it could break that seal. So, and the same if you under tighten them. That's why it's so important to just double check with your tech data just to make sure that you're not making any silly mistakes. So now we just want to start gently placing some of the electrical connectors back in place. We don't want to start connecting anything up yet. We just want to loosely put things back where they were, because sometimes some of these cables, when they go back, it's easier to do some of them up in a certain order. So last thing you want is to put things back into their connections and then to realize you've got to undo them again because there's another one that goes or runs underneath it. And a good example of that is the U cable for the aircon compressor, because where that runs, a lot of these other cables are in the way of it. So we need to just start putting these clips back into place. And we can bolt up the throttle body. Again, it's just good practice to start all of these by hand and then finish them with a ratchet. Once you're happy with the positioning of everything, you can start making sure that everything that you need, or everything that got disconnected previously, is plugged back in with all of the security tabs in the correct position as well. Bring back over the alternator cable. Okay, so I'm happy that everything on the engine side is right and everything is tight. So now it's just everything here in this electrical box that everything needs to go back exactly as it was. That little click you heard was the little clips that hold the ECU in place. So green to green, blue to blue, black to black, the way around, white to white. And this clips onto the back end of this plug down here. So once they are all back where they live and everything is routed correctly, again, you want to make sure everything's routed as it was when it came off. We can fit this cover back. So now everything is back as it was, apart from a few engine covers. I'm going to leave them for now. I've just pumped the coolant back up to pressure. I've just put a little bit of water in there for now just to make sure that we haven't got any leaks. And so far, so good. Apart from the puddle that was there from earlier, we are all good. I can't stress enough how important it is to double check your work after you've done anything. So especially with a coolant leak, we need to repressurize the system to make sure that it doesn't leak again, either from the pipe that we replaced or from anywhere else, causing a second leak that we have to sort out. Apart from making sure that it's got the correct amount of antifreeze in it and putting the under trays back on and some of the engine covers, all we need to do is make sure that the system is bled. I've done plenty of videos about how to bleed coolant systems, so I'll leave it for them. After all that, the car is more or less ready to go out on a road test, just to make sure that the fans kick in, fans are warm inside the cabin, just to make sure that everything is correct and right for the customer. So for now, I'll leave the video there. So if this video has helped you guys, please give us a like, share, subscribe. Any questions, you can just put down in the comments. I'll do my best to get back to you. And hopefully you'll have an easier time with this job than I did.